Welcome back to the Everything New York Giants podcast with New York Giants fangirl. I'm your host, Adrianna. Today, I am joined by the man of the people, the New York Giants beat writer for ESPN, Jordan Ranaan. Welcome. Very excited to have you.
Thanks. I don't know if that was the man of the people when I originally started. As I've kind of grown here, I don't know if the people kind of agree with that anymore.
Maybe it depends on the day, I'm sure,
Yeah.
like it does with everything in the Giants world.
It still says it in my bio. I might have to one day adjust it. But it's like the same concept of like adjusting the picture too. I don't want to adjust the picture. I want to be like, 15 years younger Jordan,
I am getting DMs from people like, you have to change your Instagram avatar because you have a Saquon jersey on. I'm like, can it just be a Singletary jersey now then?
I saw something about how you shouldn't change your avatar in your picture because that's what people recognize. So like when you're scrolling real quick and you see it, you're just going there because you know who that is. That's why I'm going to pretend that I'm going to keep mine forever.
Yeah, it's going to be a Singletary jersey now. It's fine. No one has to know the difference.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. You could just change the name, cross out the name on the back kind of deal.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone's probably going to do this year anyway.
Yeah, he's not very well like that right now. That's for sure. The Saquon name on social media, I definitely see that a lot. Which is kind of ironic because they didn't offer him a deal, and if they ever offered him a deal that the Eagles did, he would be a Giant right now. So
right. I think my bigger problem with that whole thing is like he was, from what I gathered, it seemed like he was surprised that fans were mad. I'm like, what do you expect? You went to the rival, and you didn't really thank the fans. Like if he did what McKinney did, I think everyone would have been like, all right, he still went to a division rival. This sucks, but like at least he doesn't hate the fans.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think if once he went to the Eagles, it was over.
It was all over. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to win that one. But here's the thing with Saquon, and you saw this. This is why he even showed up last summer. He cares about what people think. He's very sensitive to that stuff. So it's not a surprise to see that play out the way it did, and him not have it actually bothers him when he hears that. Right? He's like, hey, come on, what did I do? Like, just let it go. Come back when you do. Everyone will, nobody don't hold grudges against you. But now the whole Tiki thing coming back, and it became bigger than it ever would have been. Just go off to Philadelphia, and people would have got over it eventually.
Yeah,
now it's a thing, and now it's when they come back and play, like that whole thing is going to come up again.
He's going to get booed, no question. Absolutely. When he runs out onto the field, he will get booed by everyone at MetLife except the Eagles fans.
There's not even a doubt that he's not going to be well liked for the next few years among Giants fans. Eventually, they'll get over it. That's the way it works. But
yeah,
he was a good player for them. He was a really good player for them.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest concerns that I've seen coming out of the draft too is why didn't the Giants go running back higher after, signing Singletary? I think the reality is, unless they brought in someone like a Dalvin Cook, maybe, no one is replacing Saquon. Like we all know that, even Dalvin Cook. But what do you think about the running back that they're bringing in from Purdue, Tyrone Tracy? From what I've seen and heard about things, it seems like it was a good pick, and he's going to be good on special teams. And I believe he was a wide receiver first, so he's got some good pass catching ability.
He was a wide receiver actually full time up until this last year, so he really is pretty new to the position, which I think is part of the allure of Tyrone Tracy. Is you say, well, this is a guy that can grow into the position. But the reality is, and you said, why didn't the Giants pick anyone higher? Like, I never thought, they would go anywhere higher than likely a third, fourth, fifth round pick. They're of the belief, and that's why they are where they are, that you don't have to invest as much in the position. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they're winning Super Bowls with a seventh rounder out of Rutgers. There's guys like Austin Eckler, who was undrafted. Like, they just don't think you need to put that heavy investment in the position. That's why even the offers that they made to Saquon Barkley, they made begrudgingly to a degree because they never really wanted to spend at that position. They liked Saquon the player. They liked Saquon the offensive weapon. But the fact that he was a running back was always in the back of their minds, and why they put such a limit on what they wanted to give him. So I'm not surprised that they didn't go till the fifth round where they got Tyrone Tracy Jr. So And I do. I like it. I think he can give them something immediately. You're talking about a guy who basically is a run after catch guy, like that. Run after contact guy. Run after catch when he was a receiver. Now he's run after contact now that he's a running back. But a guy that you want to get the ball in his hands and let him make plays. And I think that's kind of what we've seen here the last few years with Brian Daboll. That's what he envisions this offense being, right? Get the ball into the playmaker's hands, let them make yardage. You're talking about a guy like Jalen Hyatt. You're talking about Malik Neighbors. You're talking about Wan'Dale Robinson. And now you're talking about a guy like Tyrone Tracy. So I think he will be able to contribute immediately this year. Now, will he play a gigantic role? Probably not. But the fact that you have your fifth rounder and he's going to be able to contribute to some degree as a rookie and have potential to grow as a running back. I know he's going to be 25 years old. I get it. But he's sort of new to this position. So there is, I think, hope that he can become a better running back moving forward.
Yeah. What do you think we're going to see from Gray this year? I expect with Breida gone that he's going to take on a bigger role. But I'm curious because I feel like we haven't seen as much of him as maybe I would have expected since he's been here.
That's fair. They clearly were a little bit down on him last year. They tried to shoehorn him into that
punt return
role. And I think he kind of lost some confidence. It was really just a disaster all around, to be honest with you. It wasn't a great rookie year for Eric Gray. But look, this is a guy that they thought was like the same as Tyrone Tracy this year. They viewed him as that kind of prospect. So I think given more opportunities, and I think that'll be there. Now, I wouldn't completely rule out the idea that the Giants still add a veteran to that room in the mold of Matt Breida, something like that. It might even be Matt Breida. We will see. Because remember, last year was kind of the same thing, and then they got they brought in Breida. So like it makes sense to keep adding pieces to that room, and a veteran moving forward would not surprise me even the slightest.
Yeah, and I heard Joe Shane mention that too. He specifically mentioned the fact that there's going to be veterans available come, June 2nd when all those cuts come. So with that being said,
somebody likely is going to get injured at that position. I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah, and having a veteran there outside of Singletary, I think would be helpful too, because the rest of the room is quite young.
Yep, exactly. So it makes a lot of sense to think that somewhere along the line, they're probably going to add another running back here.
Yeah. With that being said, let's talk about the offensive line, because a lot of fans are outraged that they didn't draft an offensive lineman. And I, for one, am not at all. I think people magically have forgotten that we signed 4 veteran offensive linemen, and we've drafted 4 offensive linemen in the last 2 years who have done literally nothing, who have brought absolutely nothing to this team. So were you surprised by that? Or did you think that based on the amount of picks and needs that wasn't going to be something they were going to go after?
Yeah, it wasn't that surprised. Like you said, they signed 4 offensive linemen, veteran. 2 of them are going to start, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Jermaine Illuminor and John Runyon are going to start some way, shape, or form. There could be, if Evan Neal has a bad summer, 3 of those guys starting, okay? So they've obviously made an investment there. And then you even have the investments from the past couple of years. Evan Neal, a top 10 pick. Andrew Thomas obviously is excellent. He's a top 10 pick as well. Like they had already invested 2 top 10 picks in the previous 4 years in the offensive line. Top 10 picks. A second rounder in John Michael Schmidt. A third rounder in Josh Azudu. A fifth rounder or sixth rounder, I think, actually, in Marcus McKeithen. So at some point, you need those guys to be the answer. You can't just keep drafting offensive linemen, because how are you going to fill the other holes on this roster? And they had a lot of other holes on this roster. So it made a lot of sense to me. I thought they would take an offense or defensive lineman, probably even defensive lineman more than offense, like in the back end of the draft. But they only had 6 picks. They didn't trade back. They didn't add more picks. So there wasn't a ton of opportunity. They needed a tight end. They needed a running back. Heck, they still probably need, I think we all argue, they need a franchise quarterback. They need a cornerback still. I mean, there's needs. Safety, they obviously needed desperately. They got in the second round. Third round was cornerback, nickelback in Andrew Phillips. They needed in the fourth round the tight end. So they got Theo Johnson. You can only do so much with the amount of holes you have. So am I stunned? No. if you had told me before the draft they weren't going to take an offensive or defensive lineman, I'd be a little bit surprised. But on the offensive line part, early in the draft, it didn't make sense. Like, you already have all these investments. Right. It's time for some of them to show out. That's it.
So do you, like me, think this report about them trading up to take Joel, I think that's complete bullshit. I don't think there's any truth to that whatsoever. Also, from what I saw, it was like unconfirmed, and that's just what Adam Schefter thought was the case.
Yes, he was just giving his opinion, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I have a different opinion on it. That's fine. But I mean, like, he made it very clear he was just giving his opinion, that it was not fact. It was not something he knew. So, look, I just think you're not giving up future assets, a future first rounder, and drafting another offensive lineman. Yeah. Not with the position that this Giants team is in right now, because some way, shape, or form, you can think what you want about Daniel Jones, and I've always been on the Daniel Jones bandwagon, so to say. But do I think he's a guy who's going to lead you and carry you and win you a lot of Super Bowls? No. So they have to find that guy.
Yeah. Were you surprised that they didn't trade back at all to get more picks since they needed so many things?
I was a little bit. I would say, yeah, that surprised me because I thought that made sense. They only had 6 picks. I think there was only 2 teams that had fewer in the draft.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it made sense to trade back and maybe add a couple picks. Now, the flip side of that is I didn't think it would be too far deep, because the 5th, 6th, 7th round is supposed to be weak in this draft. It's supposed to be much stronger again next year. Like, this is the sort of still the spillover of the COVID effect and guys having extra COVID years in college. And so the idea of adding guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, picks in the 5th, 6th, 7th round doesn't really make a ton of sense this year. So I get it on that end. But I did think that in the middle rounds, it probably would have helped this team to trade down, add some more picks. You want numbers, right? If you add 5 guys in the 3rd to 5th rounds, maybe 2 of them hit. If you add 3 guys, the likelihood is 1 of them hits. So, yeah, right. I want to increase my odds and increase my chances. And Joe Schoen has shown that he's very, very willing and able to do that his first 2 years. So that's why it did surprise me he didn't do it this year.
Yeah. Let's talk about the wait, I want to go back to the offensive line for a second. So you said that you have met Carmen Bricillo, but haven't talked a ton with him. Is there anything that you have seen or heard about him that gives you more confidence that he's going to be able to help some of these young guys?
I mean, I just look at the track record. That's the thing that stands out to me the most. He seems to relate to guys. He has a very relatable personality. So I'm just looking at the results, and the results and I always say Oakland, man. I say that all the time.
Oh yeah.
In Las Vegas, the Raiders from Las Vegas. The results were impressive. I mean, he didn't have an overload of talent, right? He didn't have stars and like guys that you're like, okay, this guy is a top 5 pick. He's just a lock and just going to throw him in there and be successful. No, he took guys who were middle of the road guys, Jermaine Illuminor type guys, and they performed well. So I think just his personality with the way he's able to relate to guys from my first impression of speaking with him, I think I could see why guys like to work with him and take his advice and his teaching. And you look at it for evidence, you say, well, look, Jermaine Illuminor had options. There were teams that wanted him. He played well last year at 2 different spots. So he proved he was a starter in the NFL, and he followed Bricillo here to New York and is now a member of the Giants. So I think that's a good stamp of approval right there to show that these guys like working with him.
Yeah. What do you think is the plan for Evan Neal? You think the plan is he's going to start at right tackle. He's going to go in, hope for the best. And if things go wrong, then they're going to kick him inside.
He's the right tackle until he's not the right tackle. That's kind of the way it's been explained to me.
Yeah.
Whether that could be training camp, whether that could be the preseason, that could be during the season. If he's struggling at all, they're just going to, end the experiment and say, let's try and make it work at guard, I guess. Let's see if that works. Because they invested so much in him. He's a number 7 overall pick, a real blemish on Joe Schoen's resume right now, by the way. Like,
yeah.
Kayvon Thibodeau, we can sit here and argue whether he's a star and he's worth the number 5 overall pick. He's not a bust. He had double-digit sacks. He's a quality player in this league. Evan Neal is the one we're looking at, and we're saying this could be a disaster for Joe Schoen, right? If they can't get anything out of him, they use the number 7 overall pick, and they kind of got nothing out of it. The first 2 years have been rough. Yes, Andrew Thomas made that jump, but that doesn't apply to most guys. You know, all of a sudden they turn around in their career. That's wishful thinking. I think at this point, if they can get anything out of Evan Neal, an average guard, I think you take it and you kind of run. So his leash will be very short in regards to the right tackle position now that they have a guy that they know can play there and start there. So he's ready. So one bad week in Evan Neal's tackle journey is over.
So it's that short. Okay. Because I think
so.
Why not move him to guard now? Give him the entire offseason to adjust to playing guard again, which he obviously hasn't played since college, and let him have that time to adjust. So then week 1, in theory, he's ready to go. But the way I feel about Evan Neal
is it's salvageable, I guess, in some degree.
They have a lot of faith in Carmen Bricillo. Is what they must have.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, he was the number 7 overall pick.
Yeah.
They're trying at all costs. I mean, think about it. The Giants did the same thing with Eric Flowers. They tried at all costs to make it work. You know, everything they did was, okay, you know, this is the year it's going to work. No, this is the year it's going to work. We're changing coaches. We're doing this. We're doing that. Yeah, it's going to click now. And eventually it didn't click, and he ended up being okay guard in other places.
Yeah, well, and I feel like with Evan Neal, if they bumped him to guard and he was good, like he was in college, like from what I remember, most of his college career, he played guard. So probably a big change going from guard to tackle in the NFL. But I felt the same way about John Mara hiring Dable. If it works out with Dable and if it works out with Neal at guard, no one cares how long. I would think that like the fan base will forgive the fact that it took X amount of time for them to figure it out. Like if Dable starts winning again and we go to the playoffs and Evan Neal's a great guard, I can forgive the fact that for the last 2 years, he was terrible. He was also dealing with injuries and the whole team was a disaster. So I'll get over that. The same thing with Dable. Like I want him to stay here and be the coach.
Yeah, the reality is the likelihood that he goes and he's a standout guard is probably pretty slim too. Even Eric Flowers win, he was like a serviceable guard. I think if you get that, you're happy. But look, he'll probably get a shot at both spots before all said and done. And then they'll just, if it's not working, they'll just move on. And Joe Schoen has shown an ability to move off guys pretty quickly if they just don't think it's going to work. So they see something, you know, Bobby Johnson, actually, even when I was talking to him last year, kind of on the side about Evan Neal at the end of the year when Evan Neal was essentially not going to come back. He was insistent that the Giants as an organization, and they thought that Evan Neal could still be a quality guard. So I don't think that opinion has changed from the higher ups in the organization. I still think that exists.
Yeah. And I think a lot of fans feel like that too. How do you go from playing college so well at guard and then being so horrible at tackle?
Well, he did both in college. He played guard, I think, 1 year and then played one tackle, left tackle, right tackle. So he spent the year at like every spot. But there were questions coming in. And I remember speaking to somebody that I trust who's an executive elsewhere. And he was like, honestly, I see Evan Neal as a guard in the NFL. I don't know why they see him as a tackle. And at the time, I was like, huh? It was like a sort of dissenting opinion that wasn't very common. And turns out, you know, he's right. He was right about that.
Yeah.
He also doesn't like Drake May, that same guy. So let me tell you. So even if they traded for Drake May, I have my concerns about Drake May because he didn't love Drake May at all. He actually liked JJ McCarthy better than Drake May.
Oh my God. The relief, let's talk about the wide receiver now, because I could not explain the relief that I felt when they drafted Neighbors instead of JJ, knowing that he was on the board. That interview that he did with Rich Eisen, the Easter morning workout, I was like, they must really love this kid. Do you know what it was about JJ or any other quarterback in this draft? Did they just feel like maybe they would have picked JJ if he fell to round 2 or if they traded back into round 1. I mean, I didn't think Penix was worth the 8th overall pick, but I'm not the Falcons. So was there anything about like the quarterback situation that it was just Drake May or bust at the end of the day?
Well, it's only Drake May or bust because Jaden Daniels wasn't in the picture, right? If it was Jaden Daniels, I know the Giants were super high on Jaden Daniels. So I would assume if he was like, yeah, but we just considered that out of the picture because it wasn't even possible. So I think it was really, there was the first 3 quarterbacks and then the other 3 were there was a gap in regards to the grades that they have among the Giants. So the top 3 guys, I believe, were graded really high. And then there was a significant gap for the JJs and Penix a lot because not all, because so a lot of it said he doesn't move great in the pocket, which doesn't always translate great to the NFL game. But also the injuries was knocks him down a peg. And then I didn't really hear that much about Bo Nix. I just don't think he was graded high enough, like at that level. So I think that's why we end up where we are. Then you have the wide receivers graded really high, like up near the quarterbacks, maybe even above the quarterbacks, in regards to grades. So the Giants said, hey, we need to take this guy. It's a position of need, of great need. They haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver since 2018. They haven't had a number 1 receiver, a real one, since also 2018 when Odell was still around. So it made sense for them to do that. If they can't get the quarterback, you want them to build the infrastructure up around the quarterback, right? And say, okay, when we can get that quarterback, when the opportunity does present itself, then at least we have something where we can take advantage of the rookie quarterback deal now.
Yeah, that was my argument.
Where do they get the quarterback, though? It's a big question.
Yeah. Well, my argument is you need an offensive line and you need weapons. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They still need those 2 things. So if you're already paying Daniel Jones and you can't get the guy that you want, which is Drake May or Jaden Daniels, then you do the next best thing, which is get a weapon for DJ. And, if DJ's not here next year, then you still have Malik Neighbors on the roster.
I agree with the philosophy. The concern, it's a natural concern, is where do they get the quarterback?
Right.
Do they have to go 4-13 this year? Because they go 4-13, and Joe Shane and Brian Dable want to sit there and preach patience. The fan base is going ballistic, right? The fan base fires coaches and general managers when the owners can't justify it to their fan base anymore. And going into year 4, that's a pretty hard sell. Hey, we need to finally get our quarterback here. And then you're like, well, the first year the quarterback might not be great because he's learning on the fly. So then you're like, hey, we need another year. Like, it's a tough spot. Where does that quarterback come from? It doesn't often come from free agency. You don't want another middle-of-the-road guy. Kirk Cousins was a free agent this year. That was like a big deal for a quarterback. But that's the level. It's like that's a big deal of free agent quarterback. What do you do if you get Kirk Cousins? You're probably not winning anything anyway, so it's probably still not the right quarterback. You need better than that. How do you end up with better than that? Where's that quarterback coming from? That's why it would have been nice to pick up extra draft capital in next year's draft. That is something I would have. If I didn't get a quarterback and I were to the Giants, I would have made that a priority. Instead, Howie Roseman and the Eagles are the ones who are sitting there collecting all this 2025 draft capital. Now they have 3 extra picks next year. And guess who doesn't have any extra picks? The Giants.
Do you know how many picks we have for next year?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know they don't have any extras, in regards to multiple first or second or third round picks. I have to, I don't know off the top of my head if some of these trades involve the 2025 6th or 7th round pick, which is always possible. But they're not overloaded with picks, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance we lose Brandon Brown this offseason. So I think we could get a 3rd rounder for him.
That doesn't come in. Does that often have to wait another year? I forget the rule on that.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. But let's speak hypothetically for a second.
Comp picks have to wait a year. I'm not sure if that does though.
Oh, okay.
I think it does though, to be honest with you.
So if the offensive line is better this year and the offense looks serviceable, but let's just say they're not sold on DJ. And the defense in theory should be better on paper, it's much better. If all of that comes together, maybe the possibility is next year they trade up to get a quarterback and they're willing to give up those picks and whatever it takes to get one, because in theory, at that point, they're a quarterback away.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a lot harder to move up from pick 14 than it is from pick 6. That was the whole thing. The problem was, and this is why I don't blame him, if you have a gap between those guys, you shouldn't force a quarterback pick. Totally fine with that. And they just couldn't get up. Like, I think, honestly, after having conversations, you probably would have had to give up 4 or 5 first-round picks to get to number 3. Like, that's the only thing that was going to make. New England Patriots had no intention to move off the 3rd pick. Yeah. So it would have had to have been so outrageous, so ridiculous. I just threw out a number there, by the way. Some random number, But
even if they did that, I think fans would have been pissed because he's unproven. So now you're giving up the whole ship for a quarterback that you've never seen, and you still need a wide receiver, a corner, a safety, offensive line. Like, all of these
that would have been too much. The Giants aren't in position. Maybe, like you said, next year, if you feel your team is, kind of set up for success, and you don't, and you're getting close to being able to contend with just, if you could add that big time quarterback, then you could give up future first round picks. And obviously, I never should give up 4 or 5. That's totally ridiculous. That's why no one was ever moving into number 3. Mm-hmm. But if then you're able to give up, okay, we'll give up our first round pick this year, our second round pick, and a future first and another future second or something like that. You can then do that because you're in a better position. Right now, they're not in that position where it made a ton of sense to do that because they don't have enough pieces around them. They still have so many holes. I mean, I could sit here and tell you they're probably still not good enough at guard. They're probably still not good enough at running back. They're probably still not good enough at tight end. They're probably still not good enough at they need more interior defensive line depth. They need cornerback depth, and their safety position, I guess I feel okay about it at this point now that they drafted a guy in the second round, but we got to see him be turned into Xavier McKinney or Landon Collins first before we feel that way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. All right, let's talk about neighbors.
Should be, because this year might be tough now. This year's going to be a grind.
But I'm like a little optimistic because we should have an easier schedule and more 1 p.m. games. But to me, it still all hinges on the offensive line and Evan Neal. Like, if that doesn't go well, it's over. I don't care what the defense does.
Well, I think they have a contingency plan this time around, so I would say, they could just slide Jermaine Illuminor out to right tackle, fill in the other guard spot with whoever. It could be Azudu. It could be one of these guys they just signed. Like, Aaron Stinney has started in the NFL before. They, maybe Marcus McKeith didn't impress them, but whatever. Somebody could fill that guard spot. At least you don't have a total disaster at right tackle. You have Jermaine Illuminor behind him now. The problem last year was Andrew Thomas got hurt, and they had the other side as a problem. Yeah. So if that happens again, if Andrew Thomas gets hurt, this team could be in trouble, because at best you have Illuminor at right tackle, and what are you doing at left tackle?
Right. God knows they're not putting Joshua Azudu there again. I hope.
That was the worst, and look, I've seen a lot of really bad offensive lines. That was the worst offensive line that I've seen assembled for the Giants that they were being forced to play early last year, which is why, and I get the Daniel Jones criticism. Mm-hmm. He started from start to finish 4 games, maybe played 5 games. He played most of the Miami game. The line during that time, I don't really care who was playing quarterback.
Yeah.
It would have gone poorly. Now, it went very poorly for Daniel Jones. He played poorly. And the biggest concern with him right now is the injuries on top of everything. He's kind of been shell-shocked into becoming a shell of the quarterback he probably was. Remember, his rookie year, his strength was throwing the ball deep. Now it's like, why won't he even throw the ball deep? He would just wing it deep left and right. A lot of times probably should when he even shouldn't. Right. And now it's like the pendulum has swung so far the other way. Mm-hmm. It's like, what do we do here? Like, what has been pounded into him that it's gone that far to that direction?
Yeah. Do you think it was odd that they never said last year that the neck injury was just a stinger? Because he came out this year and said that that's all it was. And everyone was so worried that it was something serious. And a stinger has happened to multiple Giants players. and I'm sure others.
Yeah, I think that's just an easy way for him to call it a stinger. That doesn't mean there wasn't other problems, right? Usually don't sit out 3 weeks for a stinger. Yeah, I don't know if I'm fully buying that. I think that's downplaying a little bit. I actually have Post-it notes I keep on my desk. And so, then I have a phone number on the bottom. I'll have to block that out. But look, you can see, look what it says.
Disc injury.
That's his
stinger, question mark.
That's his first neck injury. And the second one, it says stinger, but with a question mark. So I'm not quite sure that's the full extent of it. It's definitely something to be concerned about. I don't care how you want to phrase it or whatever, how they want to call it. He had 2 neck injuries that forced him to miss time. And neck injuries are things you don't mess around with.
Yeah.
They're not a joke. Any neck injury I consider a serious injury. So now he's had 2 neck injuries and he's recovering from a torn ACL. Those are serious injury concerns. Even if he was a stud quarterback and you were fully sold on him, you'd be concerned about whether you could build around him in the future.
Yeah. All right, let's go back to Neighbors because we didn't get to talk about him much yet. We only have a couple more minutes. I think most of the fan base is very excited about him. I think the interview that he did prior to the draft when he was asked about New York and Daniel Jones was not great. And then in his first press conference, he calls him Daniel Jones, which I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's used to saying Jaden Daniels. Is there anything that you noticed in his press conference? Like, I also was like, maybe he's just nervous and he's like realizing that New York is a little bit of a scary place to be when it comes to talking to the media and stuff like that.
I just don't think he knows much about Daniel Jones.
Okay. Do you just think it's that simple?
Yeah. I mean, he knows about other guys. He doesn't know much about Daniel Jones. A lot of these guys, Landon Collins was one of them. He used to tell us, like, he doesn't watch football. Like ever, like if like obviously film, but like Thanksgiving, like everyone's watching football. He'd be like, what are you watching the games at all? The Cowboys are playing in a game that matters to the Giants. No, I'm watching a movie. Like it's a lot of these guys, you'd be surprised. Wow. They don't watch football and consume football like we do, right? As just fans, especially down south. So I just don't think he's that familiar with Daniel Jones. Didn't know a lot about him before getting drafted here, before he started getting asked questions about, Daniel Jones. Like, sure, he knows the quarterback. He's probably seen him, in highlights here or there. But I just think like the original interview, he just was like, and the Giants quarterback, because he didn't even know who the Giants quarterback was, to be honest with you. Now he does. I think it was just a little slip at the press conference, which made for a funny bite. But yeah. We'll see. Look, I'll say this about Daniel Jones, and he takes a lot of, heat from guys and former players. I think the guys that generally play against him, and definitely the ones who play with him, fully respect him and like him and think he could be a really good quarterback because he has a lot of skills. Like if you go watch him in practice, Daniel Jones could make like any throw. He's got a strong enough arm. He can run. He works his butt off. Like, so these are things you look at and you're like, okay, why wouldn't I respect this guy? Now, there's people who have played against him who have said things the other side of it over the past few years.
Yeah.
Former players and pundits certainly like to take their pot shots. But I think we've reached a point where it's gone overboard. And a lot of stuff out there is just like Daniel Jones slander. Like, it's like you can't throw a football. It's like you go on social media and even some people on, TV and radio, you'll hear them like take pot shots and just say he can't even throw the football. Like, come on. Daniel Jones played at a top 10 level 2 years ago. He's not a complete scrub in the league. He has 1.5 touchdowns to interceptions throughout his career playing with a pretty bad supporting cast, So he's not a total scrub. Do I think he's a star quarterback, a guy I'd want to build my team around? Probably not. But he's also not someone who literally can't throw Malik Neighbors the football. Like that's
right.
And that's sort of what the narrative has become. I think it's gone way over.
Yeah, who's going to throw him the ball as if we don't have a single quarterback on the roster.
Yeah. Daniel Jones could throw the football. I mean, come on. The idea he can't throw the football is just, it's stupid. Like, is maybe the best at reading defenses and stuff? Fine. But the idea that he can't do anything and throw the football is just, I think we've reached critical mass. It's like totally in the other end of the spectrum now because that's how it is. You're either awful or you're terrible. That's like today's world. There's no in between. And he's reached all right, he's awful. Like he can't play football. He should never throw a football again. Like that's pretty much when I go and see the comments when I post a story, that's essentially what it says.
Yeah. If I were him, I would never go on social media again because I just feel so bad. People are ruthless. But a question that I've
He told me once his mom, he doesn't really, his mom, but used to tell him like big things that came out and people were saying about him, but that's about it.
Yeah, well,
I hope his mom's not relaying a lot of this stuff to him.
Yeah, oh my God. Well, when he was on the Kay Adams show last season, she would always ask him about stuff in the news, and he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
he was pretty boring on that show.
Yeah, he might not be coming back. I'm not surprised. I didn't expect anything from him. The fact that he was on in the first place, I was like, wow, maybe we're going to get to learn something new about Daniel we haven't seen before.
Did you learn anything?
He likes Will Ferrell movies.
Okay.
I also learned recently that he's the third, which this entire time I never knew.
Oh, Daniel Jones the third, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure like his dad is Steve Jones, goes by Steve Jones, but his actual real name is Daniel Stephen Jones.
Interesting. I guess he's not going to have the Jones the third on the jersey. But all right, quick question about him, because I've also gotten asked this a few times. Do you see a scenario where the Giants pull a Broncos and yank him towards the middle to end of the season so he doesn't get injured and they can release him next year?
If it's going very poorly, there is a point where you have to think about pulling your investment. Now, the New York Giants, with John Mara running the show, he's usually, and you saw this last year, and he said this about winning those games late in the season. Like, it matters to this team. It matters to them to put out the best possible product, to make sure that their fans aren't coming where they're not doing everything they possibly can to lose. To win. Whoops, slipped. And so in that regard, I could see them not wanting to do it, but you have to at least think about it. If things are going poorly and it's obviously over for both parties, like if you're the Giants, that's a huge risk to take unnecessarily. But to win a game when you're 5-10, you're risking what, $30 million, $40 million, whatever the number is exactly.
It's an opportunity at a quarterback.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's a lot, and I would think they would have to think about it at that point. But John Mara is going to wait till the last possible second. Like, they would have to officially be eliminated from playoffs, I think, before they would ever even think about doing it. Of course, Daniel Jones has to make it that far, A, health-wise, and B, play well enough where he's not, Drew Lock isn't the quarterback, or Tommy DeVito.
Already, yeah.
Yeah.
But Mara knows, he knows from ticket sales. He knows what goes on social media. He knows a large portion of the fan base does not like Daniel Jones. So I think if Drew Lock starts starting some games, there will be more people in attendance, which is a little scary, but.
I don't know about that. I don't think Drew Lock is going to bring the people into the stadium when they're 4-8, 4-10.
Yeah.
I still think it'll be a struggle. Look, the bottom line is fans will like Daniel Jones if he plays well and he's good.
Yeah.
They'll like the team if they play well and they're good. Like, they're not just coming to see a quarterback. Tommy DeVito was fun for a little while. That brought up interest, but it's always about winning and losing. And ultimately, Drew Lock's probably not going to be the answer either.
Yeah.
So at best it's a short-term, positive feeling.
Yeah. I think some fans just don't like Jones so much that they will take anyone at quarterback. Like, literally anyone. Do you think
they felt like that when they won a playoff game, though?
Right. Well, probably. I'm sure there's still some people who are like, it wasn't Daniel Jones that did that. It was
but they weren't not showing up
who made the last play. Yeah.
They weren't not showing up because Daniel Jones was the quarterback, though.
Right.
They were good, so they were showing up. And they were on board with Daniel Jones. I guess we were wrong about Daniel Jones. Maybe they didn't want to sign him to a huge deal, but I don't think anybody wanted to. Going into last offseason, this is how much things change in a year. Nobody wanted to get rid of Daniel Jones at all costs.
Right.
there was a price where everybody would have wanted to keep Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Not
now
anymore.
A year later, we have him instead of Saquon, and the fan base is all sorts of crazy. But it should be an exciting offseason. Hopefully, we're going into a better year. The draft, I think between the draft and free agency, they made some good additions, and we'll see what happens this summer.
I think the biggest thing that this Giants have done is they've reinvested in different positions, right? We can argue whether the roster is even better, but what we can't really argue is that they've prioritized what they believe are more important positions. And I kind of agree with too, like edge rusher, right? Playmaker, wide receiver over running back. Like it's a difference. There's a difference. And I do think that's for the better, but until they get a quarterback, it's like a star quarterback, it's going to be hard to really compete for a Super Bowl. That's the way this league works.
Yeah. We'll find out soon enough.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're going to spend. We're going to spend the next 12 months talking about where they're finding the next quarterback. That's what the next 12 months are going to be. It's like, where are they getting a quarterback? Who are they going to get? When they're getting them? Where does this guy come from?
Yep. Here comes the Josh Allen trade from the Bills conversation.
That's what I
and Bill Belichick.
Bill Belichick and Josh Allen. That'll come up too. That'll be hanging over this team too. At some point, we'll be talking about Bill Belichick and Josh Allen and all these unrealistic things.
Oh my God. I hope
Well,
not.
I don't know if Bill Belichick's unrealistic, but Josh Allen is.
Yeah. That's what I said too, for all the crazy people. I'm like, I don't know what world you're living in, but I'd like to live there too, because it's not reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
All right. Well, thank you.
We all like to have Josh Allen.
Yes, exactly. Well, and the Dable thing, that's all we need, apparently.
Wow. If they get reunited, it'll probably be the other way around, with Dable being back in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's
probably the best chance we have of seeing them reunited.
Yeah. Oh, that's a little depressing, but probably true. All right. Thank you so much for coming on. I loved getting to be able to chat with you, and we'll, see how the season goes. But I appreciate you coming on, and you guys all know where to find Jordan Ranaan on Twitter, social media, ESPN Radio.
Everywhere.
Where else can they find you?
TikTok.
Oh, the TikTok. Okay. You can find out there that his son is a Bills
fan. I haven't
fan.
done a lot of TikTok lately, but we'll get it back. We'll get it fired back up soon.
Now's the time before it gets banned.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Anytime.